All right, let's get into the Friday mailbag. info@davidpakman.com for questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, all of it. And of course, occasionally a tweet or a Facebook message or a YouTube comment might make it into this segment. We love all of it. Let's start today with some criticisms, which I'm glad to issue corrections when I make mistakes. I'm glad to give a sampling of comments from people that aren't thrilled with me. David wrote in and said, "You were out there, dude. Trump was and maybe will be again the best thing that's happened to this country in decades. Open your eyes. Your radio cast must be funded by the demo rats." No, the demo rats and the demon rats and the Democrats, none of them fund the show. George Soros doesn't fund the show. Whoever else you imagine is funding the show doesn't fund the show. The show is funded mostly by our audience and then by a few advertisers. That's kind of what it is. I guess all I can say is congratulations for using the correct form of your. All right. So David is waiting around for the return of Trump, almost in like a weird messianic way. It's very, very interesting. Next criticism is from Don. Don wrote in and said, "You are a freaking idiot. Take your liberal, Marxist, socialistic garbage somewhere else. It's idiots like you that are destroying this country. The oligarchies are bringing this, that's oligarchy apostrophe S, are bringing this country down. And should they succeed, you won't mean crap to them. Then let's see how you will put food on your table, pay your mortgage, and charge your defunct grid system car. You don't know crap and are just as stupid as the rest of your Democratic constituents." Well, a really strong condemnation by Don of a political ideology that I don't hold. I'm not a Marxist or a socialist, but maybe go find a Marxist or a socialist and criticize them. I don't know. It's always weird. They seem confused. Matt wrote in about interviews with the so-called radical left. Matt says, "David, sir, just listen to your explanation of how right-wing candidates may or may not end up on your show for interviews. And it made me wonder if there are any left-wing candidates that you might consider radical or unreasonable in some of their views, and if you'd be interested in interviewing them. Perhaps there aren't any, and it is purely a disease of the Republican Party. I wouldn't be surprised, but I'd be interested in your take either way." Yeah, I mean, listen, there are extreme leftists. The difference is the extreme leftists don't ever seem to win their Democratic primaries. And one of the things we do on this show, because we can't turn the show into the, ninth congressional district show where we interview everybody running for the Democratic nomination and everybody running for the Republican nomination. We tend to wait until after primaries to do these interviews as a practical matter. And the Republicans will often vote for the wackiest in the primary. And so that's who I end up interviewing. Democrats rarely vote for the super wacky extreme left winger. And so by the time they get to me, there's been a sorting already. And much the same way that Trump would never have won the Democratic primary in 2016, a lot of the so-called radical left that Matt is referring to in his email don't pass that first filter. And that's why they don't end up on the show. But I have no opposition in principle to speaking to anybody. Robert wrote in, this is very interesting, and this relates to Roe v. Wade and abortion and other things we've been talking about. Robert says, "Big fan of the show, appreciate your rational approach to controversial subjects. Wanted to write to you about abortion. People are unfortunately, but legally, making end-of-life decisions all the time. When an individual's higher brain function ceases, the family can opt to have life support suspended. This is generally rationalized by the collective understanding that once higher brain functions have ended, the person is already gone. If people have accepted, and this is the wrong accepted, okay, so the right word here is ACC, but let's imagine we understand what Robert is saying. If people have accepted that this is the way things are, then why can't the opposite be true? If your life ends when your higher brain function stops, then why would your beginning of life be before your higher brain function begins? My understanding is that dreaming is supposed to begin in the third trimester. If I'm not mistaken, this should signify the beginnings of thought, and the brains need to process them. So there's a couple issues here. First of all, Robert is completely correct. And there's actually another aspect to this, which is quote, other people make decisions about end of life all the time, as you're talking about in situations where people's brain function has stopped, or in lots of different situations, including hospice type situations. Why couldn't the same decisions be made when a fetus has no brain function and isn't going to? So in these most extreme cases where Republicans want women carrying non-viable fetuses to term, why is it okay to make those decisions for others later and not earlier, aside from the personhood question? But there's kind of a bigger issue here, which is you're never going to convince the right on abortion with arguments like this, because they will say, well, we don't care about brain function. We care about heartbeat. And that's where the heartbeat bills come from. And then you'd say, well, okay, but what about this? And they'll say, now, we believe life begins at conception. And it's an endless loop. And so while these types of questions that Robert brings up are super interesting and they're accurate and they're relevant, that's not going to convince the most ardent anti-choicers on the right. Sadly, I wish we could talk sense with them, but unfortunately we can't. Sean wrote in about my interview with that Republican candidate, Allison Hayden, who's running against our friend Eric Swalwell. And Sean says, to David or whomever, I enjoy all of David's interviews. I find them fascinating and informative. But I think my favorite type of interview is when David speaks to Republicans who seem to be confused by facts versus their opinion. Needless to say, I was glued to your discussion with Allison Hayden. As per the usual, I think David did a great job, but there's one question I would love to hear him ask of these people. If Trump would have won the presidency, would they still be making such a big deal out of the legitimacy and security of our elections? Guys, we all know the answer to that. Of course they wouldn't. If Trump had won the electoral vote, or the electoral vote and the popular vote, they would be doing what they did in 2016, which is saying sort of like, there was some fraud, and my real victory was even bigger. But they would not be filing 60, 70 court complaints. Of course, they wouldn't be doing any of those things. Don't believe for a second that this is some kind of moral fight for them. It's just about their guy lost. That's all they care about. Daniel wrote in about my Republican guests and says, David, after hearing your interview yesterday with the Northern California Republican candidate, that was Allison Hayden, and after hearing several other recent interviews, I have an honest inquiry as to whether you seek out the worst Republican candidates to interview, or if you're just shooting fish in a barrel. Do you specifically target the crazies, or are you just giving us a sampling of what the Republican Party has generally become? Love your taking them to task, though, and trying desperately to make them think about the word salad they're spewing. So last week, we had a voicemail asking a similar question. My colleague John has been heading up these interviews. He has interviewed, I want to say, close to 50 different Republican candidates. Some of them don't even respond. Some of them do, but then they find out about how interviews are conducted here and that real questions will be asked. And then they say, I'm not interested, or they stop responding. Some will agree to come on. And then once we schedule it, we'll never hear from them again. Some confirm the interview literally hours before it's scheduled, and then they just never show up on Skype, and we never hear from them again. We cast a wide net. Some of them are less crazy, like that guy Johnny Teague I interviewed. I still disagree with him about just about everything, but he was less overtly bonkers and less cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But we are casting a wide net. We're not targeting the whack jobs, but a lot of them are really wacky, and it's just a representation of who's running in that party right now. The zombie Playle, wrote in and said, David, you should sit back and think about why right-wingers around the world are performing better than ever. People are very angry at their politicians. Yeah, I think the implication here is the left has done so terribly that globally, and really they mean like Western Europe and to some degree the Americas, voters are going to right-wingers. What's going on is that parties on both sides anecdotally have failed voters in lots of parts of the world. But the real change has been the echo chambers created by social media and modern media, which allow really stupid, quite frankly, ideas, primarily on the non-science right, to get repetition that they wouldn't otherwise get. We've talked before. If Nixon had had Fox News and Facebook, it's not clear Nixon would have actually ended up resigning. And it's possible he would have been impeached by the House and maybe not convicted by the Senate if senators at the time had seen support in social media the way there was support for Trump during the impeachment trials that he had. So I do think that a lot of this is thanks to disinformation, faux populist messages, or maybe actual populist messages, which don't really lead to any substantive policy, have also kind of infected the political discussion. And so it's not about the left has been so bad that right wingers have won. It's not that at all. But there is a story there to be told, and I think it's an important one for sure. All right. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, things you want to say, write to info@davidpakman.com. Your email may be featured on an upcoming episode. And remember that the party doesn't have to end right now. You can sign up on my website, joinpakman.com, to get an extra show every day. That's the bonus show. And so many more great member benefits. You can use the coupon code INDICT, INDICT, to save a bundle off of the cost of a membership. We'll see you on the bonus show or otherwise back here on Monday.